Good evening. The Rio Rancho Board of Education meeting for Monday, October 12th, 2020 is now called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Secretary Scott will be presenting.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Secretary Scott. Jane, can you take a roll call for us?
Yes, I will. Madam President Galbraith,
Present.
Vice President Morgan,
Present.
Secretary Scott,
Present.
Board Member Cullen,
Present.
Board Member Coleman.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone out to our meeting tonight. I am Amanda Galbraith. I'm the board president, and I will be conducting this meeting tonight. I hope everyone had a great fall break. I think it was nice for everyone to have a few days off. We will go ahead and get started tonight with some introductory comments by Dr. Visu Cleveland, our superintendent.
Hello, everyone. Okay. I'll have to tell you, there were some folks in the Rio Rancho School District this weekend that didn't have the break quite as planned, but that's just kind of how life is sometimes. So we had a rather interesting weekend. All right, first slide, please. I think one of the things I wanted to start out a little bit was with celebrations. The total number of COVID cases is really small based on the number of students we have enrolled on our in-person learning. From the very beginning, prior to everyone coming back, we had 9 total. We have 5 students and 4 staff. But what most people are concerned about is, well, what did it look like from the time you actually brought students back to in-person learning? So out of that group, this is not an addition to, this is included in the numbers I just gave you. We have 7 total. We've had 5 students and we've had 2 staff. And 1, of course, is always too many. But when you look at the number of students we have in in-person learning, those numbers remain quite small. So that's certainly something that we're pleased with. But again, 1 case is more than what we would like to have. The processes for surveillance testing and dealing with our positive cases is really working very well. And I think we've finally got those fine-tuned, and that's due to a lot of hard work by a lot of different people. And so we have, as our challenges have arisen, as we've had more things to think about, I just want to tell you there's been great teamwork in pulling together and dealing with those challenges and issues that just seem to come every day. There's something new. I would want you to know that we had several staff members who worked this weekend to collaborate with personnel from our state agencies to determine whether it would be appropriate to open or close the school. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. And then I just wanted to say our custodial staff works on Sunday afternoon to get in there and do deep cleaning in the building so that when students and staff return, they would be returning to a building that had been deep cleaned and disinfected. So I wanted to mention that, and I'll mention it again in just a minute. I just want to thank the folks who were involved with that this weekend. And it started early Saturday morning and ended Sunday afternoon. And so the principal and assistant principal, certainly the district administration staff, folks of human resources, student services, facilities, transportation, all were involved in that process this weekend. And then, as I mentioned, a real thanks to our custodial staff for a very short notice coming in and making sure the building was ready for Monday once we had the go-ahead. Here's some of the challenges that we're still facing, still trying to work through. We certainly still have some some issues with aligning all of our processes to the 3 state agencies that we work with. And we think we've got them down, and then, we start running through them, and there's always lessons learned every single time. So we're continuing to work on that. That is a work in progress. It's not completely where we hope it will be, but we'll keep working on it. And I can just give you an example of we had a positive cases identified on Friday evening, and so we knew that was going to be a challenge to make connections with all of the players, everyone who needed to be part of that decision-making process. And so, for example, on Saturday morning, we made a call to the public ed department, but weren't able to get a response there. And so then had to move to another state agency. And we have been told there would be someone that would be available on Saturdays and Sundays. So there's just still work to be done. But I will say this, that with everybody who's involved in the process, everybody has been pleasant, and everybody's wanted to make it work. And everybody has a sense that, we're all in this for the same reason. And that is to do the very best we can for our families and for our students and for our staff. And so, while we still got things to work out, it doesn't come from a lack of caring about that. It just, we just need to work out the logistics. So staff were, working hard to find out what would be the decision regarding opening of school on Monday. And, until we knew, we didn't know if we were going to keep the school open or keep the school closed. And so you have very different activities based on which way that decision went. And so trying to get someone to make that final decision, I would just share with the board that the district doesn't have the authority to make that decision. That decision has to be made at the state level. So we can't move forward until we have that decision, and they have to look at a lot of different factors. And I'll give you an example of one of the things that came up. And one of the individuals had tested at UNM, and UNM sends their results to PED, and PED wasn't there. And so the Department of Health couldn't get the information on the tests and confirm the tests. And I don't even think we've got them confirmed as of yet. But we know what they told the family. So we were able to kind of work from that assumption, but we couldn't make final decisions based on that assumption. It's just to give you an idea of the complexity of all of it. There's so many different players, and everybody wants to do their fair share. But if there's one little kink in the system, then everything becomes more difficult in terms of getting a final resolution. We will be sending Beth Pendergrass and Mike Chavez and others are working on a debrief document from the week before we had an incident, and I sent up a debrief document to PED so they would have a better understanding of what happened at the district level based on some of the decisions that are made. This one, I'm turning over to Beth and to Mike because it's going to be more complex. It went over several days, but the intent of it is not to be a complainer, but to share with the state, here's all the things that happened and why this turned out to be such a challenge, in hopes that we can get some of those things fixed. So we'll be sending them that document, and hopefully they can see what a response looked like. And for example, waiting on the decision, one of the things we were really concerned about was letting parents know early enough. If you're going to close a building, they've got to provide childcare for their family. And you let them know late, you put a real problem in front of those parents to figure out what to do on Monday. So we knew on Friday. We didn't get a real final, semi-final decision until late Sunday. And that's something that we hope we can improve on, all of us that are involved in that process. And again, a rapid response is the goal of both the state and the district, and they're learning too, and they're trying to figure out how to make it work. And I think the other thing that might be more difficult than the district working with the state agencies is the need for 3 state agencies to coordinate their efforts to work together. And so everyone, I just want to stress, everyone was pleasant, everyone tried to help, everyone was willing to do what they needed to do. There's just still some work that has to be done to getting our processes better aligned. Okay. Okay, I'd like to move on to another topic that we've had some information requests about and asked for some clarification and some misunderstandings. And so I want to share with you some information about the state requirement and mask. I want to thank Jerry Reeder for helping provide some of this information. And I would like to kind of take you through who qualifies for an exemption from a mask and how is that determined. So we must be in compliance with PED's Special Education Services reentry guidelines, as well as CDC guidance. And one of the difficulties with that is that in some places it's conflicting direction. So you don't know which one to do because they don't tell you to do the same thing. Some cases they tell you to do something quite different. Our district is required to provide exceptions for the requirement for face coverings for any staff member or student who has the documentation that it is not safe for them to wear a mask. So, what would qualify as not being safe? Age, for example, a very, very young child. We have some very young children, 2 and 3 years of age. It may not be safe for a child that young to wear a mask if they have other conditions. Certainly medical conditions, certain folks with severe asthma or other breathing difficulties, not always able to wear a mask. Certainly anything related to their disability or any health, a safety consideration can impact this decision. And it's looked at on a case-by-case basis. They try to consider every single aspect. And because we do know there's no evidence that other measures sufficiently compensate. So we really need everybody to wear a mask that possibly can wear a mask, but understanding that there's a few who cannot. There are the things I want to go back over quickly that we are doing. We're certainly still social distancing for 6 feet or more. We have eliminated large group gatherings in our school buildings and on our campuses. We screen our staff and students daily, encouraging still hand washing by everyone, staff and students. And of course, face coverings. Everyone that can wear a mask is required to do so. We are not to allow people into the building who aren't wearing masks unless they have this exemption. And certainly we know the importance of masks is to prevent respiratory droplets from traveling in the air and onto other people. And we know they travel most frequently through cough and sneezes, talking, raising people's voices, singing. There's lots of different ways that it can travel. We've lost the PowerPoint.
We'll just give Jane a second to get back on. While we're waiting just for a moment, are there any, do you mind if I just go for questions to this point?
That's
Is
great.
that okay? Are there any questions, board, that you have to this point? I'm just going to kind of look at your general. Okay. I do have a general comment while it looks like Jane's getting back on. I'm really grateful that you, for being proactive on getting that debrief out to the state. I think that's very smart to get that out to the state. So thank you for doing that.
They're compassionate about it. They really are. They do care, but they truly don't understand. They don't know what it is like. And so I think the more we can give them concrete information, like how many calls at what time, who could we not find, all of those kinds of things, really give them something to act on, rather than just saying that it was a challenge. So we have heard from some parents and students who are upset when there are others in the building without masks, and I understand that. I absolutely understand that. But unfortunately, this exception is required under the reentry document, and so we do have to follow that. And so, what happens if you're in a classroom and there's a child without a mask? Then what do? We go, we really emphasize all those things I mentioned a few minutes ago about the 6 feet and the hand washing and all of those other things. But we also, in addition to that, every parent in that classroom receives notification of the exception. So they will be notified, and that notice will be sent on school letterhead so that they know that that's official. And there is a notice of mask exceptions, and it goes out whenever we have that situation. So every parent in the classroom should be aware that we have a child without a mask. So sometimes people ask, they want to know why and why aren't they wearing it and all of that. And that's something that we are not at liberty to discuss. And the privacy rights of students are protected by both state and federal law. I want to also emphasize on the other side that it is really important to note that there are very specific limits concerning who warrants an exception. And they are rarely given. And there are some requirements that you do have to meet in order to not wear that mask. So who's eligible? Who could qualify for that? Well, students who are on IEP plan or a 504 plan are examples of students who could qualify. The exception must be determined by the IEP or 504 team, and it has to be determined that it is absolutely necessary. So it's not, this isn't personal preference or what you like or what you want to do. There has to be a reason for it, and that team has to look at that. As part of this, you must have medical documentation explaining the need. So the doctor needs to explain to the team what is the condition that keeps the student from being able to wear a mask. And so without that, that's absolutely essential. And one of the other factors, particularly for some of our children with disabilities, if you aren't able to physically remove the mask without assistance, then a student doesn't have to wear that. So that's to protect a child who's maybe having some difficulty, but doesn't have the ability to reach up and take that mask off. Those young people are not to wear a mask. And this would be the basis of an exception, but it doesn't apply to anything else. So it's only for those students who have that kind of a physical situation in which they are not able to reach up and remove the mask. And then another factor that's looked into are those students that receive no benefit or very limited benefit from remote learning. Next slide, please. Students who have an exception must remain in their small group classroom throughout the day to avoid cross-contamination. And they can certainly still be part of their inclusion classrooms, but they will have to do that remotely. So in present, they stay in the small groups, very much like they were prior to in-person learning, the return of in-person learning. And the bigger classes, they are only able to attend remotely. In addition to anyone that is in that class with a student without a mask, then they are provided additional PPE, and and that includes things more than just the mask. It can be the coverings or some other, perhaps in addition to the teacher's mask. Maybe in addition to that, there would be a shield on top of that. So, or maybe with other students, that could be the case as well. And then last but certainly not least, some children just have such an aversion to it. But Special Services has indicated that they've had a lot of success in helping students learn to wear masks and setting those goals. And, we know that children learn from each other. And we know that sometimes that's one of the best ways young children learn, in particular, is they watch others. And so what we've seen is children see other children with masks. And in many cases, they want to do that too. So unless there's a reason to prevent the child from wearing a mask, those that have just a severe aversion are working with them to learn mask wearing goals whenever that is appropriate. We've had parents say, well, who do I talk to about mask exceptions? They need to talk to their principal, their assistant principal, or their SEAL, and they can help them with that issue and explain, again, what I've explained, who qualifies and who doesn't, and what are the steps for doing that. And then again, when we've had parents say, well, I'd like to know there doesn't appear to be anything wrong with that child. Why are they not wearing a mask? We're not able to talk about whatever that issue is. That's medically privileged information, and we cannot share that. We can't speak with anyone about it except the parent or the legal guardian. I'm not talking very well today. It's been a long day. Okay, just quickly, a couple of other slides. On the board resolution for bringing back some of our at-risk students at the secondary level, I had an opportunity to hear from the planning team this afternoon, and I just want to share a few thoughts about what they're proposing. Again, to kind of remind the board, what we were asked is just to send our thoughts and ideas to the state. This is not a plan per se. It's what we might do if we had a plan or if we received the go-ahead to be able to bring back small groups of secondary students. So we're providing input. That's all we're providing. But I do want to let you know kind of what their thoughts were about this. We're looking at if we were able to bring back students, we would look for those that need academic and other supports like social emotional needs. The areas that the committee's suggesting targeting are those groups identified as part of the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit, because we can't do everyone. And one of the concerns that the public ed department has voiced is if they give us this flexibility to do this, will we not adhere to those guidelines and regulations that they've set down and bring back larger numbers and increase the chance of spread? So we kind of looked at who would we target, and certainly looking at these groups would be groups that we would look at trying to help and support that would be consistent with the findings in the lawsuit. And in addition to being, because we have many students in those groups that are doing very well, so we're not looking for that alone. We're looking at that as kind of being the gateway. And then one more thing, they have to have one more factor that would be major consideration. One would be inconsistent attendance, that they've been absent 5 or more days this quarter, or they are on an academic plan such as an IEP, an SAT, a SAT plan, or an IEP plan, or a 504 plan. And then last, but certainly not least, for our secondary, are any of our students, so these categories that is not on track for 4-year graduation, and trying to intervene with them. Are there any other questions? Just an update on a few areas that seem to be a lot of concerning questions about.
Okay, let me just go through the board specifically. Wynn Coleman, do you have any questions? No. Okay.
I don't. No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jeffrey Morgan.
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Noreen Scott.
No questions. Thank you.
Thanks. And Catherine Cullen. Okay, sounds good.
Oh, I have no questions. Okay. I return it to President Galbraith.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Cleveland, for that update. I always am grateful for those comments to get us a good feel for what's going on in the schools right now. So thank you. We will now move on to item E, to approve the prioritized agenda and proposed time allocations. Discussion on the prioritized agenda as it's been presented.
Madam Chair, I would like to request that any items that require a vote be moved forward so that I have the opportunity, since I have to exit the meeting early for a prior family commitment.
Okay, so my only concern, and then I might need some help being a new member, trying to figure out where exactly to put things. My only concern is with, we have some people here presenting one of our reports, and I want to make sure we get through that report at least. I'm going to actually ask Catherine, because I think she has the best feel for the meetings. Do we and Lauren, actually, is there, I know that we have some things in policy and stuff of how things have to go. Can we move up our business items in between the reports 1 and 2? Is that a possibility? You guys are all muted, so I'm just going to stand here and stare at you.
So, Lauren, yeah, it's within policy, but I think you can change it. But there's some reports that that we would be voting on afterwards, right? Let me see.
I don't think there's any. I was just looking through that.
just
I don't think there's any.
I tell you, this new system kills me. I have to keep going back and forth.
Catherine, I looked at that and I did not see anything, but
Hold on. I just was trying. I apologize. This is taking forever to load too. And I have to keep going back and forth on this new system. So yeah, we do have a policy on how our boards should be. Lauren, I don't think there's a problem moving a business item before a report. Do you?
If there's a motion and a second and enough votes, then I don't think there's a problem with that.
But we do have the bond that they were going to be presenting, and then we're voting on that in the consent agenda, correct?
I think Mr. Lee wants to make a presentation on the pricing.
So I'm trying to, right. He's doing a presentation on the.
We're kind of losing you, Catherine. Where I think the best place would be to have, if we could take all the business items and go after report 1. Other than that, unless you guys want to talk more about the report 6, which is the building. Before.
See, and then, yeah, you have the building that's on there, and then we're doing the RFP for that. But I don't know if that has to do with the other, so I don't know what she was presenting on it. That would correlate with that.
So we could do reports 1 and I don't know if this makes it too choppy. Can we do reports 1 and 6 and then have all of our business items? Is that a possibility? And then finish the rest of our reports? I know that makes it not pretty, but is it is it hurtful to anything?
I don't think it's hurtful, but I mean, this was put out as public notice for people. I mean, that's changing a lot from reports from a business.
To change it around. Lauren, what do you think as far as?
I think all the items were properly noticed and they're on the agenda. I think you can move things around. I mean, obviously the best situation is not to do that very much.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a motion and a second and the board approves it, I think you're okay.
okay, I would like to respectfully make a motion that we hear reports 1 and 3 and then go on to the business part of the meeting and return back to the remainder of the reports.
Is that 1 and 6? Do you want 1 and 6? The build.
Yes, 1 and 6. I'm sorry.
Okay, so we have a motion to move out the business items after, well,
it might be simpler to say that items on the reports 2, 3, 4, and 5 will be moved till after business.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Lauren. That's my motion.
Okay, so that's the motion. Is there discussion on that motion that anyone wants to comment on?
I'd second.
Go ahead, Win.
I'm confused on what we're doing and what's getting moved. As I'm looking at the numbers, it's not clear.
So to simplify it, we will move items. It'll be reports 2 through 5 will be moved to the end of business. We'll be at the end of business. So after item G in business. Does that make sense more? So it's 4 reports will just be moved to the end of the meeting, basically.
So the names, can we just for clarification, would you please name the reports?
Yes, so reports number 2, state and district assessments for school year 2021. That's going to be presented by Dr. Happy Miller. Report 3, an update on the safe and staff daycare Report 4, Student Health Advisory Committee, will be reported at the end. That's 4. 5, attendance report to the Board of Education presented by Carl Leppelman. So those 4 reports will be moved to after item G, after we talk about board policy 750. They will be moved to that part of our agenda. Discussion before we go? Okay. So we have a motion on the table.
Do I need to second that again, or are we good?
Please second it just because I missed it.
I second the motion.
Okay. Jane, can you take a roll call vote to move, for the prioritized agenda, to move reports 2 through 5 to after item G in the business?
Yes, I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Board Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Cullen, are you shaking your head? Yes. Board
Sorry.
Member Cullen,
We can't.
thank you. No, okay, thank you. Board Member Coleman,
I will say I am not in favor of it, and I'd like to, for the record, just go ahead and I'd like it noted that doing so, it's just appropriate that we just kind of keep consistency with this and staying on our agenda. We've all had to make those decisions where we haven't been able to be at a meeting or had to leave. So I am going to go ahead and vote no and just ask that we stay consistent with our agenda for the future.
thank you. President Galbraith,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. I do agree, as we go forward, we should try to stay consistent with our agenda. And I for tonight, I think we can go ahead and go forward with that as we have voted. So,
Thank
okay.
you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. We will now move to public comment. We currently do not have any public comment for this meeting tonight. Those who would like to address the board through public comment may use the link that's on our board page if you go to the school website, rrps.net. We will now go to item G, which is our commendations, and Wynn Coleman will be presenting a commendation tonight.
Thank you, Board or President Galbraith. For those of you that don't know, I work for the University of New Mexico. My title is Wraparound Facilitator, and my responsibilities are working with probably what most people would consider the most at-risk youth and their families in Sandoval County. One of the things that I've been able to do, even for the people that don't have transportation, is I've been able to go to the different schools where they are offering meal pickup, and I've been able to pick up meals and take them to those families. I called Dr. Cleveland last week and just expressed to her the experiences at 2 different schools have just been just beyond expectation. They've been extremely just very nice, very welcoming. Even offering above and beyond. There were some extra like apples and broccoli one of the times, and asked if I wanted to go ahead and take those also to the families. And so I've just been so impressed with how Sodexo has handled things, and the families are so grateful that I work with. And I just wanted to just really just give that acknowledgement to food service and what the district is doing for our families. And so I just wanted to say, I appreciate the time and getting to recognize this and just say thank you.
Dr. Cleveland, did you want to say anything for a?
Well, just we appreciate those comments, and so many people do work hard. But one of the things that we all like to hear that we've done a good job, and so I know they will be really pleased to hear that, and so we appreciate those positive comments, and I will be sure they are passed on.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Board Member Coleman, for sharing that with us. We're in such a crazy time. It's so nice to hear those stories about really our heroes who are working so hard in so many different places. And so thank you for bringing that to the board and sharing that. And we really appreciate that. So thank you. Just so you know that I know in our superintendent report that we received, you probably saw that everyone will have an opportunity if you would like to give a commendation. And so I just want our board members to know that that is open for you to do as well. Just you have to let us know in advance so that we can get it onto the agenda with enough time for it to go out. So, okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm trying to look at my. Okay, so now we'll move on to reports. We'll go to report 1, which is going to be presented by Eric Harrigan from RBC Capital Markets on it's the pricing book report.
Hi, good evening, Madam President and members of the board and Dr. Cleveland. Again, Eric Harrigan with RBC Capital Market. I'll try to keep my comments brief here and happy to answer any questions that you have. But under the delegation statute, the board did delegate the authority to sell general obligation bonds in the amount of $15 million at a public sale, and reporting those results to the board tonight. So going on to the next page, so on September 24th, the district did sell $15 million of voter authorized bonds in a competitive sale. The winning bidder of those bonds was Raymond James, and the true interest cost on the bonds was 1.466%. The closing occurred on October 9th, and the district has the funds to begin construction of the projects. On page 2 of the presentation, there was a total of 2 bidders, Raymond James and JP Morgan. As I mentioned, Raymond James bid 1.46%. As a comparison to last year in 2019, R.W. Baird was the winning bidder at 2.146%. So those rates were significantly below where the district sold its bonds last year. On the next page, this is a summary overview of the bid, and the sale resulted in a premium to the district of just a little over $1 million, which goes into the debt service fund and pays a portion of the debt or the interest payment on the 2020 bonds. Next page. This page shows the maturity schedule of the bonds. The issuance of these bonds continues to maintain the district's historical debt service tax rate. And then on the next page, on page 5, provides a history of all of the bond sales going back over the last 20 years. This was the lowest rate that the district achieved on a new money bond sale. The 2 rates that were lower, those were refundings, which were much shorter debt and comes with a shorter interest rate. The sale was very successful. The rates were below what we were anticipating. We were anticipating about 1.5%, came in below, so we were very pleased with the results of the sale. We also included information regarding the market at the time, but I won't go through that unless any of the board members has questions. And with that, I'd be happy to pause.
Okay, thank you, board. Do you have any questions to this point? Okay, I think looks like we are good.
Okay, so I have really short market update. If we can just kind of skip a couple of pages here, I'd like to focus more on page 9, just to kind of show where rates have been over the last 10 years. You'll see that they are at or near their all-time historical lows. So from a timing standpoint, the district sold bonds at a really advantageous time from an interest rate standpoint. And with that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any additional questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Board, do you have any further questions for Mr. Harrigan? Okay. All right. It looks like we are good. Thank you for the presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Let me, really quick before you leave, let me just see if Dr. Cleveland has anything. Dr. Cleveland, did you want to add anything?
No, I think he covered it very well, but just to say it's a really good rate. I'm really pleased with that. And it's not the lowest, but it's pretty close to it. And so thank you for all your hard work. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. We really appreciate it. We're just going to have to invite you to all our meetings. We've been able to see you so much recently. So,
happy to always join.
well, thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right, you too. Okay, so now we will move down to report 6, which is an update report on the building at 481 New Mexico 528. And this will be presented by Melanie Archibek, our Executive Director of Facilities.
Good evening, Madam President, Galbraith, members of the board, and Dr. Cleveland. So what I'm going to do today is just kind of present the project itself and the floor plan and walk you through a few of the renderings. Next slide, please. This slide was actually put together through the wall system that we're using. It's a dirt system, but I thought it would be very helpful for today. What you're seeing right here is the floor plan. If you're, I wish I had control of the mouse here. If you look to the far right side, you see the secure vestibule. So that's where you would come in. There are 2 middle school classrooms, 4 high school classrooms. There's a commons room dedicated to the middle school and a commons room dedicated to the high school. There are restrooms, both male and female. They're completely separated. The mid school and high school students are completely separated. So when you come through the vestibule, there's a reception area and there's an area for a conference room. At that point, once you're past in that little corridor, you can either go to a access control door that will take you to middle school or an access control that will take you to the high school. There's 5 offices, not including the security officer's office. And then a copy area, a small warming kitchen, and of course your service spaces. So you've got a storage room, IT, and then there's some electrical closets within there. Next slide, please. I don't know if you guys can see that floor plan. What we're seeing right here, because it is from the wall systems, the blue is actually the flexible dirt wall system. So those can be reconfigured at another time if we see a need to change things. The areas in the center, which I'm going to call the core, are your restrooms. So we're reusing a lot of the existing walls within the core. So those consist of all the restrooms. You've got an office space that we're reutilizing, but the blue lines are all of your flexible walls. The orange, just so you guys are aware, is how they're bringing in electricity to those walls. So they're, I would say, highly advanced from the partition systems. If you guys remember the atrium in district office, these are not the same systems. Next slide, please. So this right here is as you enter the existing exterior doors and you're going through a vestibule. What you're seeing right here, because it is, as I said, this manufacturer system, we're still selecting the finishes. So that's where you're seeing custom right there. It'll be a custom painted finish that is selected by the district. Next slide, please. This is the conference room that's right off of the main entry with access to anybody that's coming, visitors that are coming in. They don't actually have to enter the high school or middle school campuses. And what you can see on that far wall, it's actually a whiteboard. So you have all these systems embedded into the wall. So there's nothing that you would see in a typical classroom where it's hung on the wall system. It's actually embedded on it. So you have the custom painted finish on that bottom panel, marker board in the middle, and then just a clean finish on the top. Next slide, please. I don't know if you guys want to do a fly through. It's through YouTube. I'll go to the next slide, and if you guys would like to after this, we can go through the fly throughs. Administrative office is just a typical space. Furniture has not been selected yet, so those are just placeholders of potential layouts, but you can see the whiteboard as part of the wall system again, and then the customized area that would be unique to the district. Next slide, please. middle school commons area. So what you're seeing right there is a back door. And to the right side of your slide, that's actually one of the administrative offices that are popping out. But in that commons area, we are providing some white marker board spaces as well. Next slide, please. Next, please. So what you're seeing on the far left of your screen is it's a small little corridor, but it's utilized as a copy center as well for the staff there. And then to the far right side, that's part of a corridor that takes you to the high school classrooms down all the way to the commons. Next slide, please. This is a typical classroom. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is the high school commons area. So again, there's 4 classrooms on the high school side of this program. Next slide, please. Another office layout. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. Can you put up the elevation, Jane? So later on this evening, you'll get the RFP and you'll hear a little bit about that of the apparent awardee that we have. But right now, we're looking at approximately mid-March to have this all completed. We're ready to go ahead and put the order in for the dirt system, and we're tracking well. There was a small addition to this. So if any of you guys have visited the site, just looking at this elevation, there was actually 2 entry points in the existing building. And so we took up the space for one of the entry points because we really want to control the access there, have one entry point, and we utilized it for a high school classroom. And then there's another area where we utilized for the middle school commons area. Everything is under the existing roof line, like the overhang. So if you have walked that site, it has a pretty generous overhang on like 1.5 side. It turns the corner a little bit. We took up a bunch, excuse me, I can't speak tonight either. We took up quite a bit of that space to utilize it for classroom or the actual function of the building, and then really to pronounce the entryway for the building itself. I now stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Melanie. It's so, I love technology and that we can see these spaces, you know, and really, if you're like me, when I built my first house, I had no idea what I was building. I was just hopeful that it was all going to turn out. Dr. Cleveland, did you want to give some remarks before we go to the board?
Just a quick, well, first of all, I love the trees. I want to know if they come with it all. No. We plant those 2 trees, you know, it would be 3 trees. It would be nice to have them. So what you're saying is if we stay on schedule, it would be finished around the middle of March?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So you have plenty of time to do something either this summer or in the fall.
Yes.
So that timeline, I think everyone needs to keep in mind from start to finish what that's going to look like. So, but that's all. Thank you for the presentation. It is really nice to see what it looks like, to kind of get a feel. I'm always amazed, though, that it looks bigger than it turns out to actually be. That's the nature of the software, but thank you very much for the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go with to Noreen Scott. Do you have questions, comments?
Yes, I have a quick question. Are we going to have an HVAC system that will accommodate the highest level of filters in that building?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Vice President Morgan.
No questions. Thank you. Appreciate the work.
Thank you. I'm going to go up to Board Member Coleman and Board Member Cullen. I'm a little nervous that you might not work. I don't know if you want to send us your comments. Hopefully you're going to work, or if you want to call in. Go ahead, Board Member Coleman.
I don't have any questions, but thank you, Melanie.
Okay, thank you. And then Board Member Cullen, it looks like you're not paused anymore, I think. Go ahead. Give her a second. Do you hear me, Catherine? Did you have any comments? It's just not. Okay. So I have a question. I really love those. We'll give Catherine maybe a second if she can get back on, but I love those dirt walls. How is it as far as sound travel? Do you know, like in our classrooms, is it going to be pretty good at containing the sound within those rooms?
Yes, the STC for the walls are rated for a classroom environment.
Okay.
That's the one really nice thing is that it offers the flexibility, but it's more of a true wall than the partition systems that we've seen in the past.
That's good. And then now when you're going to have it painted with the whiteboard, so it's painted basically on, right? The whiteboards, am I understanding that right? Or they're part of the
No,
walls?
so the whiteboard is flush as part of the wall system. The area that said customized is a color. So when we put the order in, we'll select a painted color for that. Where the areas that didn't say custom are kind of it looks like a textured, it's not textured, but it has a texture look to it. But the marker boards themselves are flush with the wall system.
Okay, I understand it better now. Okay, that makes sense. All right, Catherine, did you have questions or comments?
No, I apologize. I keep getting kicked off the meeting. So no, thank you. I'm hoping I hope everybody asks them because I'll watch it back on YouTube afterward.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Melanie, anything else on this that you wanted to comment on before we let you go?
May I ask one
Go ahead,
question?
Board Member Cullen.
I apologize. Melanie, can you tell me, that sounds pretty incredible having the whiteboards embedded into the walls. I'm curious if how much extra doing something like that is versus what we might offer in some of the other schools. Can you speak to that expense?
Extra in terms of it'll offer flexibility. So when there's a program change, if we need to move the walls around, to include the marker boards. So if you can see on the rendering, it's kind of this gridded pattern. You can switch those out. You can even put technology and screens within that. So it offers the flexibility that we wouldn't get with hard construction.
And so can you tell me though, the comparison in the costs is what I was wanting to know.
We are told that it's comparable. The difference is with timing and labor costs. So on site, you have so many trades out there doing various tasks where this is all factory controlled, which is nice because you get controls that you don't get on the site.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Dr. Cleveland, did you have anything else to?
Just, I'm not sure, maybe I heard it wrong. I thought that Board Member Scott was asking what level of filter would go into the building. Do you know what level filter this building would have?
13. Merv-rate.
Okay. And I may have heard it cut out for me for a minute. And so I wanted to be sure that question was answered. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from the board? I'll just look over your pictures. I think we're good. Okay. Thank you so much, Melanie, for your presentation and for those wonderful slides that we could see what the building looks like. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion or anything that needs to come off the consent agenda that needs to be discussed? Okay.
This is Board Member Scott. I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you.
This is Board Member Catherine Cullen. I'll second it.
Okay. Jane, can you take a roll call vote for us?
Yes, I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman,
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, so moving on to our business items. We'll start with report A, which is, sorry, I'm trying to check my notes. So the Board of Education met in a closed executive session on October 2nd, 2020 for the purpose and discussion of personally identifiable information regarding an individual student as is permitted under Section 10-15-1 H4 of the New Mexico Open Meetings Act. The matters discussed in the closed meeting were limited only to those specified in the notice of a separate closed meeting. For item B, we will now consider the approval of the September 28th, 2020 unapproved board minutes. Are there any changes that need to take place on those board minutes? Okay, I move to approve the September 20th, 2020 board minutes.
This is Board Member Noreen Scott, and I second.
Okay, Jane, can you take a roll call vote for us?
Yes, I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman,
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. So motion carries 5-0. Okay, so item C will consider the approval of the Facilities Master Plan Assistance Program application, and Melanie Archbeck, our Executive Director of Facilities, will present.
My apologies. Good evening, this is Melanie Archbeck again. So the application that we have is for the Facility Master Plan, which is a requirement from PSCOC, the Public School Capital Outlay Council. It's a 5-year plan, and our current plan is up in 2021. And so it's time for us to get started on the next 5-year plan. This application, it's perfect timing for us because one of the criteria is that we have not started yet and that we're preparing to start. And so it will provide funding, partial funding for the plan. And so that's what I'm requesting, is that we approve this so that we can hopefully get some assistance with paying for the plan.
Thank you. Dr. Cleveland, did you want to say anything before I go to the board?
I think she covered it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, board, do you have questions? I'll go to Catherine Collin. Do you have any questions on this? Okay.
No.
Thanks. Noreen Scott?
No.
Okay. Jeffrey Morgan?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. And Wynn Coleman?
No, I don't.
Okay, no questions.
This is Board Member Noreen Scott, and I would like to move to approve the Facilities Master Plan Assistance Program.
This is Board Member Jeff Morgan. I second.
Okay, thank you. Jane, can you take a roll call vote?
Yes, I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman,
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, item D, we will consider the approval of RFP number 2021-001-FAC Student Support Service Center renovations, and Michael Madrid will present this to us.
Good evening, members of the board, Board President Galbraith, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Cleveland. The Purchasing Department initiated a procurement on behalf of the Facilities Department. The procurement was an RFP. It's number 2021-001-FAC, entitled Student Support Center Renovations. It's for a facility located at 481 528 Pat Darko. On September the 18th at 2 p.m., proposals were due, and the district received 5 responses to this solicitation. Proposals were received from Brycon Corporation, Enterprise Builders Corporation, Franken Construction Company Incorporated, SDV Construction, and Weiser Electric LLC. On September the 21st, I received an email from Enterprise Builders indicating that they had some errors within their response in relation to the technical package and the management portion of it. They apologized for the incompleteness of their response, and they requested that their proposal be determined as unresponsive, and we allowed them to pull their proposal. Continued with the evaluations of the proposals as far as the mandatory documents. And it was noted that Wiser Electric LLC did not provide a mandatory document entitled the combined list of subcontractors and assignment of antitrust claims form. This is a statutory requirement per the Public Works Statute 13-4-31, and it requires that the issuing agency provide the form within the solicitation, and it also requires the contractor to submit the document identifying all the subs. It does identify consequences for not providing the information, and the consequences that they are to be deemed unresponsive and not eligible for consideration. I issued a determination notice and sent that notification out on the 24th to Wiser Electric. We continued with the evaluations. On September the 24th, the remaining responsive bidders were evaluated. It is the evaluation committee's recommendation to solicit board approval of Franken Construction Company, the highest ranked offer. I do want to note that Franken Construction was the unanimous technical qualification ranking, and they also submitted the lowest bid as regards to the pricing. I also want to mention that Franken Construction is a local contractor out of Albuquerque. Their subcontractor list that they submitted identified all subcontractors from the Albuquerque and Rio Rancho area. And we request board approval.
This is Noreen Scott. I move approval of the Student Support Center renovation contract.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Is there any discussion that needs to take place? Let me go to Catherine Cullen first.
Thank you. This is Board Member Catherine Cullen. Have we worked with Franken before? Franken Construction?
On the procurements that I've issued since I've been here at the district, they have not been successful on the responses. I don't really know the history beyond 2018. I know that they did a lot of work when I was at Albuquerque Public Schools. They've done a lot of work up in the Las Vegas area for the university in that area, and they bring an extensive list of projects that they've completed and expertise and experience.
Okay. All right, and I kind of just wanted to address with the board well, in the finance committee, I didn't get an opportunity to kind of readdress what I was talking about earlier. I know Dr. Cleveland had said, the need for this facility. I wanted to make sure that this facility was voted 5-0. So that wasn't my concern of this.
Hey, Catherine. So we didn't get a lot of that. I got the gist of what you were saying, that it was voted in. If you want to call in with your voice, to get that out better, you are welcome to do that while I go to the rest of the board just for any other comments. I see Dr. Cleveland unmuted, so I'm just going to quickly go over to Dr. Cleveland, and then after Dr. Cleveland, we'll go up to Board Member Coleman. Go ahead, Dr. Cleveland.
I'm also having a little bit of difficulty hearing Mr. Madrid. So this has been kind of a challenging board meeting. Do we, and it may have been said and I just didn't hear it. You said they have done some work recently for the Albuquerque Public School District, and the information you got back on that was positive.
That's correct, Superintendent Dr. Cleveland. I worked for Albuquerque Public Schools roughly 9 years before starting here at Rio Rancho, and they were probably successful in at least 3 of our projects, and all the projects were successes. I think they minimized the number of change orders, and I thought that they were a good contractor to interact with.
Just a comment, and that's all I have. It's the comment I made earlier. We've got to be, if we do move forward with this, the board does decide to do that, we've got to be very cognizant of the timelines. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is that we are looking like, at least in the short term, another COVID resurgence. And so we saw how that slowed down some projects earlier. And so just kind of keep in mind that situation, that we would have to have sufficient time if we are going to open to get that building constructed before the fall. And March is great if everything stays the way it is right now. But if it were to get worse, we could see a slowdown on actually getting this project or any project. So, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. Okay, we're going to go. I want to go to Board Member Coleman and Catherine, then I'll go back over to you so you can finish your comments. Go ahead, Board Member Coleman.
Okay, thank you. Michael, I wanted just some clarification. When Franken Construction did work for APS, that was even before the Albuquerque office for their company opened up, correct? So they were, I'm just looking, I looked on their website, I guess a new Albuquerque office was opened, it looks like October 2018. So they were actually up in Las Vegas and still delivering a good experience for APS, correct?
Board Member Coleman, that is correct.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
I don't know if my computer's doing weird things. I think I missed the, yes, hold on one second, Noreen. Let me go over to, when did you get your question answered? Did that come across to you?
I did.
Okay, I'm worried that we're just having technical difficulties all around and it's me that's having an issue. Okay, Board Member Cullen, and then we'll go up to Noreen Scott. Board Member Cullen wants to finish their things. If you guys are noticing I'm doing weird things and it's me that's having issues, so please let me know if that's the case, okay? Go ahead, Catherine.
Well, we're waiting for Board Member Cullen to come back on. Just a general comment. We've been using Google Meet, and we have learned we won't be able to use that beyond March. So we will be looking for another platform. They're going to start limiting their Google Meets to 1 hour, and so we will have to look for another platform. And there are some very good ones out there. So hopefully, maybe some of those will provide better connection. I don't know. I don't know enough about it to even comment on it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cleveland. Okay, Catherine, can you hear me at all? Yes. Do you want to try to give comment, or did you want to try to send something? Okay. Okay. Noreen Scott.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about, can you set parameters that a building must be done by a certain time, or there's fees associated for every day that they miss that deadline by?
Board President Galbraith, Board Member Scott, we do have the term that you're referring to is liquidated damages, and we assess a fee. I believe for this particular contract, it was about $1,000 per day. The issue of collecting on those fees is quite difficult, though. So even though it is in there, there is a bit of a challenge, and the district would incur additional expense trying to recoup those. But we do throw that in there because the contractor should be held responsible. We also have various bonding requirements, and those surety companies help us vet those contractors to ensure that they've done work, that they have the capacity, the experience to continue with these type of projects. And so they're vetted in a couple different manners, not only through the RFP, but through the surety company. And then we also have that penalty on the liquidated damages.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then Jeffrey Morgan.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Catherine Cullen, did you just join by phone? Did you want to? I'm not sure if that's her on. Okay. Because yeah, I really just want to hear what Catherine Cullen has to say. If that's okay. Let's see. Okay. So we have a motion currently on the floor. Dr. Cleveland, did you have anything last that you wanted to say? Sorry, I just kind of use visual cues as if people are unmuted. But is there anything else, Dr. Cleveland, that you wanted to add?
The other thing is, I would add to what Mr. Madrid has said, over the years, we found that those kind of penalties we've never really been able to enforce, and they just generally don't seem to have much teeth in our state. So wish they did. Sometimes we think that would probably have saved us a lot of grief. But anyway, that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. Okay.
There's been a motion.
There is a motion.
Okay, I'd like to second that motion.
Okay. Thank you. Jane, can you take a roll call vote for us on this?
Yes, I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott, Secretary Scott,
Yes.
thank you. Board Member Cullen, Board Member Coleman,
Yes.
President Galbraith,
Yes. And Jane,
Board
can you try Colton again?
Board Member Cullen,
Are you guys, can you hear me?
I can hear you great now.
Okay, for some reason, it's not allowing me to unmute on the phone.
Oh my
But
gosh.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
So we're in the
we
middle
can
of roll
hear
call
you.
vote.
Okay, yes. So yes, I am sorry. I tried to unmute myself on the phone 4 times, couldn't get through. So yes.
Okay.
I'll try on my end if you need to go back on phone
Okay,
to unmute. Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jane. So motion carried 5-0. Catherine, did you want to say anything before we move on from, I know we just voted on it, but I just feel like we kind of left you. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I did miss a good part of the discussion by getting kicked off of the site and then on the phone trying to get on. So I did hear part of the discussion that if there was any issues, it's kind of, they're just gonna have to watch the timeline on this to make sure that we don't fall behind. I know that's been costed us quite a bit of money over the time being before. Is that what you guys were discussing earlier? I apologize.
Yeah. Michael Madrid, do you want to talk to that?
Sure. Within the response, the contractor is supposed to submit a Gantt chart, and the Gantt chart kind of identifies various dates of completion, milestones, and things like that. So we'd be able to track the project as we're moving along, and that really just helps us to prod the contractor. Hey, we're falling behind because of this one sequencing isn't happening. What is your approach to increase the productivity on the project to make sure we hit that target completion?
Okay. Yeah, I know that has been an issue in the past, and seems like we've been doing pretty well on the last couple of projects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Board Member Cullen. Thank you, Michael Madrid, for the presentation on this RFP and for all the hard work that went into it. We appreciate it.
Thank you for allowing me to present.
Thank you. Okay. Catherine, I think you are working a lot better now, so hopefully it can stay that way for the next, yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed. So we're going to move on to item E, to consider the approval of the 20-003 open meetings resolution. Lauren Hatch, our general counsel, will present this.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. Every year, the Open Meetings Act requires the board to determine what is reasonable notice for its meetings. And that requirement is picked up in Board Policy 208 as well. In the past, the board has used just a readoption of Policy 208 to satisfy this requirement. However, when Policy 208 was revised earlier this year, it pushed us more towards the direction of having an actual resolution. And that's actually easier in some ways because we can just demonstrate compliance by producing the approved resolution rather than looking at an agenda and board minutes and the vote. So I collaborated with Kim Vesley on producing a resolution on the notice requirement. It follows primarily the template that's provided by the Attorney General's office as a model, and then add some tweaks that are contained in policy 208. There's no change in what the notice that has been determined to be reasonable by the board in the past. Essentially 10 days for a regular meeting, 3 days or 72 hours for a special meeting, and then as soon as possible, preferably within 24 hours for an emergency meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions, but we do recommend approval of the resolution.
Thank you for that. And we'll go to questions from, we'll start with Wynn Coleman. Any questions on the, okay.
No questions.
Thank you. Jeffrey Morgan,
No questions.
Catherine Cullen. Okay, and Noreen Scott, any questions?
No questions.
Okay. We have no questions. I move to approve. There's like the number on there. Do I need to say that? Can I just say 20-003 on my, is that okay, Lauren? Like hashtag? No.
Yeah, resolution 20-003.
Okay, so I move to approve resolution 20-003 for open meetings.
Board member Jeff Morgan, I second.
Okay, Jane, can you take a roll call vote for us?
Yes, I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman,
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. We'll now consider the approval of, and thank you, Lauren Hatch, for that. We'll now consider the approval of Board Policy 407, the transfer of high school credits, late enrollment, withdrawal audit, and this is a second reading for this Policy 407. Carl Leppelman, our Chief Academic Officer, will present.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. This is the second reading of Policy 407. And I do believe there's the major changes in the middle school section. So Jane, if you'd like, it's right there at the beginning, right there under A. And I thought it would be showing in color. For me, it's not right now, but the changes are really related more to the 7th grade statement there. An additional high school math credit may be earned in the 7th grade, but this credit will be placed on the high school transcript during the senior year after completion of all Rio Rancho public school graduation requirements and expectation as outlined in the program of studies. All coursework receiving or high school credit must meet the high school course requirements. When we met with the principals and instructional leaders at the high school, they felt strongly that looking at a 7th grade credit would be important to look at that upon the senior year, so students don't get the idea that they actually finish high school during their sophomore year. So these tend to be our students that are more advanced, and there are not that many of these students, but we do want to recognize their hard work and effort, and they can request to have that credit placed on the transcript their senior year. So I think that's the main change from the last reading. So I entertain any questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Cullen, do you have any questions?
No, thank you very much, Carl.
Okay,
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wynn Coleman? Okay. Jeffrey Morgan, any questions?
No questions.
Thanks. And Noreen Scott?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I move to approve Board Policy 407, transfer of high school credits, late enrollment, withdrawal, audit. Do I have
I'll
a,
second that. This is Noreen Scott.
okay, thank you. Jane, can you take a roll call vote?
Yes, I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman. Thank you, President Galbraith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Carl, for all your work on that. I very
You're
much
welcome.
appreciate it. Thanks for everyone who's helped in that. Okay.
President Galbraith?
Yes.
Hi, I apologize. My mic was not working. I just wanted to confirm if Jane was able to get my vote yes on that last vote.
Yes. Jane, I believe you got it down right as a yes.
Yes, I got Board Member Coleman as yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Well, now for our last item under business, we will consider the approval of Board Policy 750, COVID-19 pandemic. This is a second reading. It will now be presented by Lauren Hatch, our General Counsel.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. As you recall, 750 is a board policy that addresses COVID-related pandemic issues for the district. At the last meeting, we presented a new Section D for COVID-19 surveillance testing that's required by PED. There's been no change in the language from what was originally produced in the first reading. Basically a new Section D. And I stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you. And we have questions. Wynn Coleman, any questions?
No, thank you, Lauren.
Jeffrey Morgan?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Cullen?
No, thank you.
Okay, and I think Noreen, are you still with us? Okay. Okay. There are no questions or comments. Go ahead.
I make a motion to approve the board policy 750 COVID-19 pandemic.
This is Board Member Coleman. I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Jane, can you take a roll call vote on this?
Yes, I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott, Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman,
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries. Okay, so we don't go back up to reports. I would like to take just a 5-minute break for those of us who've been on here since Finance Committee at 4:30. Is that okay with everyone if we do a 5-minute break, or is that pressing people for time? Okay, so we'll take a 5-minute recess. Jane, if you could set your watch for that, it'll be about 7:01, I believe, is about when we'll be back.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Jane, is your time up?
17 seconds.
Okay.
One last breath.
And thank you, Jane, for keeping time. Are we live currently? Yes.
Yes, we are.
Okay, perfect. Vice President Morgan, are you back on with us?
I am.
Okay, just want to make sure
Thank
everyone's
you.
here. And I see Dr.
Yeah.
Cleveland. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you for letting us take that short break. We'll now move on to back to our reports. Our first one will be presented by Dr. Happy Miller, our Executive Director of Research, Assessment, Data, and Accountability, and it's on state and district assessments for this current school year.
President Galbraith, Dr. Cleveland, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity to share with you our plans for state and district assessment for school year 2021. Jane, next slide, please. As with everyone else, we're very anxious to know how our students are doing and how they've been impacted by the public health situation. And the best assessments for that would be our interim assessments, which we normally use because they're given several times throughout the year. So they were given last winter. We would give them again this fall, winter, and spring at a minimum. We typically use the NWA measures of academic progress for reading and math in grades kindergarten through 8 and iStation in grades K-3. Next slide, please. As we were working on implementation plans with the schools, however, a number of factors were raised that we felt could affect the equity of the test administration and the validity of the scores. And we wanted to make you aware of some of these factors because we should use the results a little bit cautiously. We're anxious to have the scores, but we also want to make sure that we're making good interpretations of the scores. So some of the issues that were raised was, for example, the stress on families. As we were discussing NWA, it's another software, especially elementary students are likely to have parents helping them. So the parents are getting used to Google Classroom and their instructional software. And then there's another software to learn and to do a tech readiness check. So there was some concern about parental reaction, helping them with it. There was concern about stress on staff to provide additional tech support. Most of our students have district issued Chromebooks, but not all of them do. So we can push out the proper settings to make sure that the test will work with the district created or the district provided devices. But for those at home, there may be additional testing that needs to happen to make sure that the devices, the settings are correct for the assessment. There was a concern that in order to have the students both take the test and have access to proctors on something like Google Meet, have some sort of open channel of communication so that they can communicate, that might be too much bandwidth in some houses, especially if there are multiple children in the house, which wasn't so much a concern for school bandwidth as much as bandwidth within a house. It led to a concern that the technical difficulties would not be random, that there might be a non-equitable pattern of participation. Some people raised concerns about the potential for students to use outside resources or for families to assist students, especially very young students as they're taking it for the first time. They might want to model and say, here, do this, do that. And that might lead to scores that aren't totally a reflection of what the student knows and is able to do. A concern was raised that the assessments measure a broader width of standards than we're currently focusing on, especially at the elementary. We're focused on essential standards, and we were afraid that might also provide additional stress to teachers as they're getting scores back on standards that are not a focus, that they're not instructing on, and that there could be some concerns among students and parents. Middle school especially brought up concerns about the limited flexibility within instructional schedules for teachers to proctor at the same time that they're trying to instruct other students, or with Edgenuity, there's a certain amount that students need to accomplish every day, and students might click through the test rapidly so they could get to the Edgenuity, which is what their grade is based on. And finally, the last consideration was that we have new baseline accountability assessments this spring. So we use the inner assessment as a way to predict how students are doing towards the state assessment, whether they're on track to be proficient or not. But we have new assessments with new definitions of proficiency. And so we can make a guess that, you know, how students are doing, but we really don't know how students would do in relationship to the new assessments because we don't have those definitions of proficiency yet. Next slide, please. So based on those factors and the conversations we had with school, we reluctantly recommended to Cabinet, and Cabinet accepted the recommendation that we really focus on the curriculum-based assessments that measure progress towards the essential standards this year. Things that students are doing in their instruction, and really have teachers focus their efforts on these curriculum-based assessments. iStation is being used for instructional purposes this year in grades K-5. So we do have all students taking iStation in grades K-5. And we had more than 96% of the students complete the assessment in September. With NWA, we recommended that it be used for strategic support and that it not be required for all students K-8 this year. By strategic support, I mean monitoring of goals, placement into intervention programs. And I can tell you that although we made it optional, we have had more than 2,300 elementary school students take the math assessment and more than 2,000 take the reading, and approximately 100 middle school in math and 150 in reading. So the schools are using it for, some teachers wanted to use it for instructional purposes, and that's fine. We support them and encourage them with that, but they all also are using it for strategic support. So it's not that we have no information, but it's different than last year when we had all students K-8 taking the NWA assessment. Next slide, please. So what have we observed? In iStation, which is reading foundational skills, the score distribution is very similar in grades 1 through 3. However, we did notice that in kindergarten, the percentage of students at the 2 top levels, which is considered proficient, rose from 21% in 2019 to 38% this September. This supports some anecdotal information that some parents, you know, it's their child's first time taking the assessment, walked through the assessment with them. We expect that maybe by November, it'll be a more true reflection of what students are able to do. October, I looked the other day, the percentage is down like maybe 2% from September. And so as students become more comfortable with it and the parents are like, okay, go take it, you know what to do, I think we will get more accurate reflection. And so kindergarten is the grade level that we're most cautious of the results right now. We don't know if those are an honest reflection or not. It may be. With NWA, we could not compare this group of students to all students last year, but what I did do is compare this group of students to the same students last year. So for the students who had scores from last fall, last winter, we did not test in the spring, and then again this fall, I looked at their percentile ranks, and about half the students have relatively stable percentile ranks, relatively stable scores. You know, a typical student remained a typical student. We did notice, however, that there were more students with larger drops and more students with larger gains than from last fall to winter. And so we don't quite know what's the cause of that. There are many possible factors. It could be students are clicking through. It could be actual COVID loss. It could be with the gains. One of the things we looked at was how long they spent testing, and especially in reading, the students with large gains took on average between 13 to 57 minutes longer. So it may be that students, when they weren't in a period and didn't feel rushed, like, oh, my classmates are finishing, they took longer, took more time, did better. So what we did notice was that where they did drop, the drop appeared to be larger in math than in reading, but we can't say that all students dropped. At least half stayed about the same and some students gained. So we'll have to compare this information to other data points that we have to truly put together a picture of how our students are doing. And likely it's not the same for every student. Different things are going on within different groups of students. Next slide, please. So we also wanted to let you know about the state accountability assessments. As I mentioned before, this is a baseline year. We have new assessments in grades 3 through 8 in ELA and math, new assessment in science for grades 5, 8, and 11. 11th grade students will take the SAT. 10th grade students will take the PSAT, and we also have an alternative assessment that we had just started to implement last spring, but the test window started in March, and so most students were not able to complete assessment. So in a way, it's still a new test to us because we don't have scores from last spring. One thing to be aware of is while they've measured the same standards and the items are likely to look similar, it is a new item bank. There are new blueprints. There will be a new definition of proficiency. There will be 4 performance levels instead of 5. So we will not be able to compare our prior scores to the scores from this test. It really is the beginning of a new trend. And because it is the first year, they will need to do some work in the summer to define proficiency once they have the data back. So we likely will not have scores until end of August, September at the earliest. And that's what happened with the first year of Park, was we received the scores in September and October. So that's likely to happen this year. But they are measuring the same standards and it will look similar to the past, but it's a different vendor, different item bank, and there are a number of changes. Next slide. One thing you should be aware of, if you're not already, is that since the SAT school day was canceled last spring for 11th grade students, the state is paying for an optional makeup day this Wednesday, October 14th. Of course, at that time, they did not anticipate that students would not be in school yet in person. It is a paper-based in-person test. We asked our seniors, who are the ones that the state will pay for, who wanted to participate. We have more than 400 students who responded. We are providing transportation to those students who want it. We are providing food. We must follow the safety protocols. The state recently changed the student to proctor ratio from 5-to-1 to 9-to-1, and we're appreciative for that. But we will have students arriving with staggered start times, temperature taking, in little cohorts of 9 students. And that is this current Wednesday. There are some students with accommodations who may also be testing on Thursday. There also will be makeup in 2 weeks, but the bulk of students will test this Wednesday. And that score would be reportable. They would be able to use it for college entrance. And that is my report, and I stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Miller, so much. We'll start with Vice President Morgan. Do you have any questions, comments?
No questions. Thank you. No comments. Good work. I would say that. Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Board Member Coleman?
No questions. Thank you, Dr. Miller.
Okay, and Board Member Cullen?
This is Board Member Catherine Cullen, and I guess for Dr. Cleveland as well. I mean, I'm very concerned what we might see out of these test scores this year. And if we don't get these, some of these students getting back to the schools, and like you're saying, that some of the testing, like the ISation, trying to get the children on, kind of teaching that, NWA, what do you, I mean, we're starting with this new baseline. What do you think this full year is going to be? I mean, I have a feeling, because we'll have the attendance report coming up here in a little bit as well. I'm really concerned what we might be seeing at the end of the year for testing for our students, how much they're getting. Like I said, because we've had a huge attendance issue. What are your thoughts on that? And Dr. Cleveland as well.
Well, one of the questions that's been raised is whether the state could waive whether these assessments really are required. These are federally required assessments. And so it's up to the U.S. Department of Education to allow states to apply for a waiver. At this point in time, October, the U.S. Department of Education has not announced any waiver process. So the state has to plan with the assumption that we will be having these assessments in the spring. That is subject to change. It could change if we have a new administration at the federal level. It could change based on the public health situation. We also have some students who have, or families who have requested that students be fully virtual for the entire year. At this point in time, and we did tell families that they would need to come on campus to test for the accountability assessments. At this point in time, there's not an option for remote testing for the state accountability assessments. That could affect participation. The state may also allow remote participation, but we're going to encounter the same issues that we were addressing with NWA, because we would definitely need to be able to see students, et cetera. So there's a number of from my perspective, do we need to have these assessments? At this point, we have to plan for these assessments in the manner in which we are told, but Dr. Cleveland could possibly address preparedness for it. I will say this is going to be a national issue, because what we're encountering, all schools in the state are encountering, and all states in the country are encountering. One possibility may be that students test, but they waive the accountability aspect of it.
Well, and that's,
I don't know, but it's beyond our control.
Yeah, because of the accountability portion. It's just really tough. I mean, across the board and across the United States, I just, you know, when we're having these kiddos do these testings, and testing is very important to figure out where they're at so we can, you know, gauge what we need to do with them. However, I just, we're having so many hurdles to overcome. And this is just another one that I think we're going to be fighting this whole school year. I mean, we saw what happened at the last semester of last year, and then now these hurdles. And again, this is part of what the state looks at when they look at our district and how we're doing on our testing. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be very hard to get an accurate reading this year.
You know, I would just add a couple of thoughts to that. I read an article not too long ago in one of my professional journals that said this will be the largest learning loss since the Great Depression. And so I think the issue of using the information to drive where children are and identifying the learning loss ought to be the intent of what we're doing, as opposed to accountability, because there's so many variables that it's just going to be impossible to compare one district to another. It's, you know, issues, for example, testing at home, there are all kinds of issues about how accurate that would be and how fair that would be. And it's just the whole thing is really problematic. LFC has met with us a couple of times, and they did ask Dr. Miller if she would send them our thoughts about assessment, and she did a very good job of sending that, and they were very appreciative. They are caught, as she said, between what the statute requires and what the federal government requires, and knowing, I think, that this is probably not a real good time to do that. And then there's one other factor, and that is the cost of assessments are enormous. And so if we're not getting back what we really need, a time when money is going to be very important for every district is, do we want to go, you know, through the whole assessment process? that being said, we need some indicator. We do need data on where children are and where they'll be at the end of the year and how much loss there has been and who's lost the most and what we're going to do to bring those kids back up to speed over the next several years. So I think that, we obviously are going to have some assessment, but what we do with it and how much assessment, how much we spend on what is questionable, all seems to be questions right now that LFC, LESC are talking about, will be brought forward in the legislative session. But it just seems impossible to be able to use this for any kind of accountability. It does not seem to be very fair at all for anyone. But I do believe there's going to be significant learning loss. I think there are plenty of indicators from many, many sources that we're going to see learning loss in a lot of our kids. And the more vulnerable our children are, the greater the loss will be. So, for example, some of our children with disabilities will have a greater learning loss than someone who, maybe another student who doesn't have that disability. But anyway, we're really lucky. Happy serves on the state committee. She has a strong voice in terms of discussing that with the state level. But from what I've heard, they don't have any consensus yet as to what they are wanting to do. And then my last comment is a lot of the philosophy right now is wait and see about the election, because they think it'll look very different depending on who is elected and whether the administration changes. I think there'll be some different outcomes. So right now, what we're hearing through the Superintendents Association nationally, and I think the national school boards, which some of you have probably already seen, is thinking that nothing will happen until after the election, until we know who will be the next president.
And Dr. Cleveland, thank you. I'm glad that you said that, because I really feel that that's the greatest thing is that we're going to see a huge loss of for these kiddos this year and part of last year. So I'm glad that you addressed that, and that was kind of where my feeling was, is not using this as accountability, but just see where we're going to have to look at where they're going to need to be next year. Because I'm just so glad that you said that, because I've been feeling that way. And I just feel that a lot of these ones are going to be losing a lot of education and not gaining that stride this year. And we'll have to look at what we can do next year with these tests. Thanks.
And I'm also very worried about what our graduation rates are going to look like.
Yes.
And so that's something we're already working on. We already have a team that's looking at how we help those students get through. Do we offer that? Will have to come back to the board if in fact we do that. Do we offer a differentiated diploma just this 1 year and allow students who maybe are not at the point of having a full Rancho diploma to be able to qualify for a state diploma? We certainly don't want that. We want to encourage our students to go for the Rancho diploma, because it represents more and people know that it represents more. But there are a lot of questions that are going to have to be answered. And this morning we talked a little bit about, after seniors do graduate, we'll have extended year, and could we spend that time for students who maybe didn't make it through to do additional intense tutoring and help to see if we can get them through by June. So there's just so many things to think about, but we are having those conversations as a district. And I know they're having those conversations at the state level, and we're all waiting to see what happens at the federal level.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Other board members, did you have any additional comments after what was just talked about? Wynn Coleman?
I do. And I apologize if this was addressed, and I'm just thinking, I know when it comes to graduation and credits that we have a higher expectation than the state standard in our comprehensive high schools. And so will that be looked at just kind of based on these circumstances that we're in?
Board Member Coleman, yes, that's one of the things we are looking at. Do we look at offering students who are not quite through the New Mexico diploma, and rather than keeping them from not graduating? I'm kind of hesitant to say that, because we really want them to strive for that full diploma. We've always put so much into encouraging that. but life happens. And so many things have changed in so many people's lives. And I've heard from a couple of parents who are just really worried their child isn't going to graduate, and they already have plans next year and they know where they're going to college and all of that. And so there's so many stresses on students and families too, not only staff. And so I think, as we get a little further in the year, we'll have those conversations. I don't think right now we need to make a shift yet. We kind of need to see where we are. But yes, we are considering looking at some one-year options that would not be something we would carry on beyond 1 year, just like colleges and universities are doing exactly that as well. They're giving more students, for example, opportunities for pass-fail, giving them opportunities to retake a class at no cost. They're doing several things to try to accommodate the learning of our college and university kids. And I think we've got to be as flexible in looking at how we deal with those issues this year.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jeffrey, did you have anything else that you wanted to add? Just want to double check with everyone. I think he's good. Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, I just wanted to double check since I gave everyone else a chance to talk. But, just as you were all talking, and I'm really grateful both for board members' comments. And I know we're just talking about assessments here, but I'm really just concerned too, as we talk about these things, is the anxiety that these students are going to have in the next couple semesters as they get into their next classes. And I think that's something that and I know that everyone is, but we need to keep looking at as these kids get into these next grade levels and are moving up and having that anxiety of just not really being where they need to be. And so I'm grateful that Dr. Miller's looking at those things so we can kind of get a baseline. But just thinking about my own kids and where they're at, I think we're going to see just a lot of that in our students in the next couple of years as they try to catch up with some of these things. And I'm really concerned about it. So.
Well, look on the bright side. They always say in a new assessment, you have if your baseline is a little lower, that's not a bad thing because it gives you plenty of room to go up. I think across the state, no one's really worried about that issue this year. I think everyone knows that our baseline will be lower than what our students are really capable of showing and demonstrating. But because of all of these factors, we may see a lower baseline. So, that's not what you aspire to, but that's probably the reality of where we are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cleveland, and thank you, board, and thank you, Dr. Miller, for your presentation, for updating us on assessments. We appreciate it. Okay, so for our next report will be an update on SAFE and staff daycare. Tana Burgos will present. She's our Executive Director of Student Services. Also, Shelley Havel, our Director of Student Services.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland, yes, Shelley will be on as well. And so we are going to be trying to do a quick as we can report. I know we have a lot of information tonight. Just to give you some information of where we're at for a very important program for our district and our community that on one of our slides talks about how long it has been in our community. So you can go to the next slide. So we connect to our strategic plan, and this is really something we've worked on, and Shelley's done a great job of working with our coordinators and our other staff that are part of the SAFE program of really hitting these areas of really demonstrating innovative and creative thinking and really engaging our students by providing a variety of enriching, positive, innovative offerings and engaging students with rich electives. However, we all know due to COVID and the pandemic that has changed a lot. And so that's why we're giving you this presentation so you can see where we're at, the things that are going well, things that we're thinking about as we continue the program because it is such a successful program. Next slide, please.
Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll present this slide. Good evening, Dr. Cleveland, President Galbraith, members of the board. This is just our overview about SAFE, of course, it's a program that's been in the district for quite some time. It actually started prior to 2004 as a grant. However, it became what is known today as SAFE in 2004 as a district enrichment program to benefit all families within the RR community. We've provided care last year. We actually ended at 1,106 students in March before we closed down. So it worked out to anywhere between 15 and 18% of our elementary population is actually involved in SAFE through the end of last school year. And of course, we had 10 elementary schools. This year, we do operate at all 11 schools with the addition of Joe Harris. And we do employ 11 contract staff in the SAFE program, as well as we have 26 current hourly SAFE staff members. Next slide.
So the program outlook for fall 2020 is the enrollment is 10 to 15% from 2019 to 20 school year. And so SAFE enrollment has decreased significantly due to the following factors. So approximately 45% of our K through 5th grade students are attending 100% online. The hybrid models decreased 4th to 5th grade enrollment to a 2-day program. Elimination of SAFE programs on Wednesdays. 9 early release schools see highest enrollment on Wednesdays. Parent job changes or job loss, and parents working from home or staying home during this time. Next slide. Yeah.
So just some of the financial considerations to be looked at compared to what we traditionally see with SAFE programs where we're fully self-sustaining. I know last year we even had a slight overage just because we had such a burst in enrollment. We were able to accommodate that in our programs. Just that historical self-sustaining where anything we're bringing in is what is supporting our students and staff, our vendors, our facility use, our materials, all of the things that encompass SAFE into becoming a very enriching program where we have what we need. The issues with that, again, the share covering budget expenses is a little bit of a hardship, obviously, because of that decline in enrollment. So with the contract positions between SAFE, which again is our K-5 program, and then EMDC, which services staff members of Rancho Public Schools, we currently have lower enrollment there. We're down about 25 to 30% at the daycare as well. But the concern is funding those contracted positions with the revenue that we're bringing in. Again, just to reference the slide that Tana presented, hybrid and 100% online instruction has resulted in a drastic decrease. We see things like high school siblings that are able to offset that childcare. If you have maybe a 4th or 5th grader who's only, after school program needing 1 or 2 days a week, you're able to accommodate that within your family. SAFE has also eliminated a lot of additional costs. We're not bringing in vendors. One, the safety of bringing in those third parties to our campuses would be a huge concern. And then also just the cost. We're not contracting with Explora. We're not contracting with our chess clubs that go to each school. We're not contracting with those folks that we have across all of the sites that add even more enrichment, almost like a field trip that comes to you. So some of those really amazing components of SAFE that we're able to offer, we're not able to offer, one, because of the safety issue for COVID, but also those financial parameters that really limit that. Again, students required to quarantine for lengthy periods, that also requires an adjustment in tuition. It's very hard to ask parents to pay for a service if they're being required by a school to quarantine for, anywhere between 1 all the way up to 14 or more days, depending on their individual situation. Next slide.
So the benefits of the SAFE program supports SEL by creating opportunities for children to create bonds with peers. And that has been one of the great things about the program is that it's been before and after school. And so they really are able to connect with peers and other staff. And so continuing that is really important, especially during this time for our students to have some connection outside the home. SAFE program participants interact with caring adults outside of the instructional setting. And even now, as it's needed even more, we feel. SAFE supports attendance for students who may otherwise not have a means to come to school without the option for the earlier drop-off and the later pickup times, which we all know parents with kids that that's really super supportive of being able to get to work if we are working at a location still now. And then the SAFE program promotes enrollment during the 2020 school year by providing consistent care during these unprecedented time in our schools. So very supportive. Next slide, please.
So just some continued benefits. Basically, SAFE really, it provides services to any K-5 students needing that. So it really encompasses supporting staff members, supporting the community. You have other folks in a typical year that come in. We have razzle dazzle, we have vendors, we have things like that that come in. Also working with campus safety. All of our staff members work for Rio Rancho Public Schools. We don't have a third party coming in to do our after school programs. And it's nice with building expectations, administration policies on each campus, that team of folks that work for SAFE become part of that school community also. So rather than a visitor on campus, they really are a continuation of the school day on both ends. The SAFE program serves families of various care needs, especially those essential workers. The folks using SAFE this year, of course, are folks who are truly working in person at their jobs and rely on that affordable care that's both convenient and accessible at the school level, but also something that, right now it's very hard to leave your kids somewhere if you're not sure about, safety practices and all of those components. And this is something that has been consistent for families in all of our elementary schools. Again, just that consistency. It's an inviting environment for students who may not otherwise have that access. You may have kids riding the bus home. I know latchkey kids are somewhat of a thing of a past, but if it's not a service that's available, parents do find that alternative. So next slide.
So some of the challenges for the year have been collecting adequate revenue results and affordable rates for the families. And we have always really prided ourselves over the last 16 to 17 years of this program functioning in the Black, and really being able to support our families and financially support the program. Our coordinator positions are costly yet beneficial to the integrity of the SAFE program because our 12 coordinators with Joe Harris, adding Joe Harris, are on contracts just as our teachers are. SAFE coordinators support community relationships, and they also support school and district needs. Costs to retain and rehire our dedicated SAFE would be devastating to the sustainability of the program. Many of our staff have worked with us for a long time and really believe in the program and are very dedicated to it, and truly stand behind what SAFE stands for. And decreasing or closing care options would be a huge loss to working families. Next slide.
So we'll stand for questions.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll start with Vice President Morgan. Any questions or comments?
No question, just a comment. Just thanks for the work. Appreciate the information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Coleman?
No questions, but thank you for the presentation.
Okay, and Board Member Cullen?
Thank you. This is Board Member Catherine Cullen. I was trying to go through the slides again. How many are working at each site?
So it is based on enrollment at the capacity of the site. So right now we have sites with a coordinator and one staff member if they have anywhere from 8 to 12 students. And we have a site that has upwards of 4 staff members working. We do have a lower ratio this year because of COVID. So yeah, so no more than 2 to 4 folks on a campus.
Because that was my question, is if we would lowered the number that we had over there and that we weren't trying to keep them all level like we had last year. Okay. What is your, do you guys even have projections of how much we're going to lose at SAFE this year with these numbers, or at least this first semester?
About 80%.
Well, we definitely, right.
So
yeah. I mean, we
Okay.
definitely have those numbers that we can give because it's such a, most of the program is really salary. So if you don't have that money coming in and you don't have certain hourly staff, so we definitely can give you an exact number, as approximate as possible if you'd like to see that.
Yeah, because what's coming in, and then, and it's a great program. I love the program. My daughter was in the program, and we certainly don't want to lose the program, but I know we have to keep transferring money from the operational for it. So I'm just kind of trying to get a projection of what we're going to be looking at for the rest of this school year. I mean, obviously we don't know what's going to happen, in January, but I think it's pretty feasible that our enrollment now is probably what it's going to stay at until the end of December is what I'm figuring, if you guys feel the same way.
I think it depends on, I always say that I kind of feel like we're all day by day, right?
That's true.
And Shelley and I talk every day and we say, okay, so what are we doing today and how are we changing it tomorrow? And so I wish that I could say, exactly what it's going to be through December, but it might change.
Right.
And so I think we have an idea, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't add some students too along the way. So
right. We might add a few, but obviously I'm thinking unless, the governor shuts it down again with the high numbers, then of course, then we would lose that. But yeah, we might gain a few, but we could lose a lot more. So
correct.
Thank you, Tana. I appreciate it.
All right, and Dr. Cleveland, did you want to give some comments?
Well, just I think two really important points that Tana and Shelley made are really key. One is how do we sustain the program to when hopefully next year we go back to normal? The other is that when and if our secondary students come back, then our teachers who are all virtual right now, some of them are going to need the service as well. So we only have, our elementary back, and many of those middle school and high school staff members have children. And so, if and when they come back, we certainly should see a little bit of gain there. But it is a challenging time. It provides a great service. I think of all the years that we've had SAFE, certainly since Tana has been the executive director, we've never, ever had a year that it was not in the black. And so it has always been self-sustaining and self-supporting. And this year is just a very unique circumstance. We're living in a whole set of unique circumstances. But those are a couple of thoughts I sure want to emphasize and support.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cleveland. Thank you, Tana and Shelley, for your presentation, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll move on to our Student Health Advisory Committee report, also known as SHAC, and Shelley Havel again will be presenting, our Director of Student Services.
Thank you, Jane. Again, I just met with you all, but President Galbraith, members of the board, and Dr. Cleveland, we're back for SHAC now. This is a quick report. I know our SHAC, we did meet just prior to the closing of schools in the spring. So a lot of initiatives shared across the board that are not necessarily unfinished, but we definitely have more work to be done this year, and we'll be meeting soon with our SHAC for the 2020 fall semester. So for those of you who don't know, the SHAC is also known as the Student and School Health Advisory Council. And what we do is we look at all topics encompassing health. That could be nutrition, that can be mental health. There's some components that we look at in terms of SNAP guidelines, things of that nature, and also the wellness policy for our district. Next slide. So again, connections to the RRPS strategic plan. A lot of what SHAC looks at is how do we look at the whole student and the whole staff as a whole in terms of what makes us healthy and able to come in and learn. Again, things like that physical nutrition, we look at things like PE and balance with nutrition, mental and emotional health. And again, we do have representatives from all areas. We have, in our last SHAC group, we did have students, which was really exciting to see what input some of our high school students from the district had just on the relevance of topics. We have administrators. I know Member Coleman has joined us often for our SHAC meetings as well. So we do have quite an array of folks who join us for SHAC. Next slide, please. Just a quick overview. These are all of the components that we look at for SHAC. I know one of the main ones that is on the bottom of this list, but will be the priority this year, is looking at that health services and nursing. Again, that nursing and health component is the focus of the district, obviously with all of our COVID-19 recommendations, but we'll be looking at that greatly. Last year, we did focus primarily on physical and nutritional health, areas that looked at, what are the policies on campuses, what consistent things are we doing to support students in that healthy living. Some of the other factors, social emotional well-being was a huge focus in the previous year and of course ongoing, and we'll talk about some of those initiatives as well. Next slide, please. So just some of our key updates. Again, I know I'm trying to keep it short, but we had quite a few topics that came out of our SHAC collaboration. So some of the key celebrations, just looking at what types of initiatives for physical activity and nutrition are happening across our campuses in the district. Again, I wanted to highlight that we did have 3 high school students that represented the SHAC from both cyber from Cleveland and from Rancho High School. So we did have some really neat input from those students who are living and working on campuses every day and really experiencing opportunities for healthy options. One of the big things too is just ongoing discussion of smart snacks and working towards focusing on healthy food items during school food sales, fundraisers, classrooms all the way from pre-K all the way through 12th grade. And again, another key component last year, we call it BAC instead of the SHAC, but the Behavioral Health Advisory Committee was created as a temporary board committee of the previous year's SHAC. And that did meet monthly, and we were able to talk about some really amazing mental health examples across the nation. And that's led by our board member, Coleman, and she does lead a great meeting for us almost on a monthly basis to look at some of those mental health focuses. And again, we focus on quite a few topics, but that's one area that we're able to focus on through that. Next slide, please. So our focus for this year, again, is just really looking at how we were looking at student activity as nutrition as a whole, right? Student wellness, what is wellness? What does that encompass? And of course, it looked a little different at pre-K compared to elementary, middle, and high school, but each level did have quite a bit in place to support students in different ways. So some of the research in place, some of the PE practices across schools, active breaks. I know a lot of those schools are working constantly, especially now that there's so much technology based to work with, what types of active breaks we can incorporate in addition to the recess transitions, opportunities for healthy and active activities outside of school. So things like cooking clubs, running clubs, different initiatives that are student interest based our schools have started, and just having awareness of that. Specific work already was shared. So one of the nice things about SHAC is we bring folks together from all campuses and different levels, and it's a great time to really see how something might be and then take that idea and put it into place at your site. So one of the things that was shared a lot, I know a lot of the schools have been working on food pantries over the last year, mini clothing banks, things like that that we don't necessarily think of health related, but as far as student wellness and meeting needs, those were some of the greatest things I saw shared this year that sparked interest in sites that maybe weren't quite in the process of getting them started, but we're starting to think about it. So it's a great time to share. Next slide, please. So just some successes. One of the things we looked at, we had a collaboration with the Sandoval County Health Collaborative. They did bring in some materials, I know both for Sandia Vista Elementary and for the SAFE programs. And they've been printed very user-friendly, engaging materials for over 900 of our kiddos in 1st through 4th grade. So that was definitely a positive. Looking at smart snacks compliance across campuses, and I know Sodexo does a great job with Mark Willis coming in and sharing some of those regulations, one, to spread that awareness, but also to look at building consistency. One of the other things the SHAC looks at is encouraging administrators at middle and high school during the New Mexico YRRS survey collection year. So that's a piece that we promote. Again, elementary school healthy practices, looking at PE programs, supportive scheduling. I know that's a topic that comes up a lot from PED in terms of our safe and healthy schools, is how we schedule students to promote health, whether it's separating lunch and recess, separating meals so that students don't rush to transition, things like that, little things throughout the day. So not one big culminating event, but little things that schools do to support student wellness. And again, just to highlight this, nearly all schools discussed establishment of on-site food pantries, backpack programs for the weekend snacks for students who are in that high need for food, and then beginning stages to promote nutrition when away from school. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick touch on the collaboration with Sandoval Health that I shared, the materials they brought in. They did bring in the materials, like I said, for 900 students. We did begin this, got the materials right at the close of January. So February was a really solid month. And of course, we tapered off. So that's something that sites and schools that have the materials can continue to do now that students are back in person. What's nice with this is it doesn't add something new, but it does support things like mindfulness and activity that schools are already doing. So it's just a resource, and eventually they go home to the parents and they have that as a resource too. Next slide, please. So just some challenges. Again, our year was cut a little bit short, and we do meet twice during the school year just to touch base and bring information together. But again, a lot of initiatives in the planning stages, and reporting was somewhat limited with that end of the school year. We were also supposed to have our district-wide review from the Safe and Healthy Schools through PED last year. They look at food service consistency, they look at our staff and student wellness plans. But again, that was postponed due to COVID in March. That would have started late spring and throughout the summer. So that's something that we'll await guidance on our new window of time for that. Committee participation is limited at times. I know there's interest, but we're kind of meeting rich right now, especially with the movement to hybrid where all of our PDs and things are online. It can be hard to just get everybody together at one time. So again, meeting frequency for SHAC is once per semester. Again, it would be great to meet more, but getting folks together for that obligation can be tricky. And just that there's a lot of topics. There's a lot of topics that you could really focus on one topic with an entire committee. And we have anywhere from 8 to 10 topics that we cover. So it's a lot of information in a short time. Next slide, please. So for this year, the one change to this is we will actually be moving our meeting to November, just because I know we do have both SAT and conferences coming up. So again, scheduling is a concern right now, but we will be meeting before the close of the semester. We will be holding our meetings virtually. We'll continue to focus on updates in all areas. However, this year we will be focusing on those COVID practices relating to health and wellness, just because it is harder sometimes to reach all of those topics from a distance. So just to see what innovative ways all of the campuses are meeting student needs even while away from campus or only there partially. So that's our focus for this year. Next slide, please. And I'll stand for any questions on our SHAC.
Okay, thank you so much. First, before we go to the board, I'll go to Dr. Cleveland for any remarks.
Shelley, would you just share the makeup, not names, but generally the makeup of the committee? Who is on the committee?
Sure. So we do have, we have an elementary administrator. We have several nurses and counselors. That's typically the bulk of our representatives. We do have teachers, at least 2 to 3 teachers from each level, elementary, middle, and high school. We did have the students. I did have a student representative from each school last year. Truancy, Mark Willis from Sodexo, and then Joe Sanchez from nursing, of course, and Kim Williams join us as well. So we do have leadership from each area, and then also staff that work in those areas on campuses as well.
Okay, thank you very much. That's information I thought the board might like to see as who actually serves on the committee. So thank you for your presentation and for the work you do.
Okay, thank you, thank you. We'll start with Wynn Coleman.
Hi, Shelley, and thank you so much. I just want to say that it's a pleasure getting the opportunity to participate in the SHAC meetings and seeing what's going on. I did have a question about the youth risk and resiliency. Do you know when the results, because when I checked the website, I know it only shows middle school from 2017 as far as survey results. Do you know when we'll see? an update?
Sure. As far as my understanding is it's typically a year lapse because they do district comparisons and statewide and then national comparisons. So it is typically a year-long process before those are released, but they are always public once they're released. They share them with us, and then they're also on that YRRS site, and they do they lay it out both in a state comparison, a district comparison, and then a national level comparison.
They even do it county, don't they?
They do.
Okay. And for anybody, it's just really interesting to look at. It's a survey for middle and high school students, and it looks at their risk factors. You know, if, for example, they have somebody that at home that or just somebody in their life that they can talk to. It's a real interesting and very thorough survey. So encourage anybody to take a look at it. But thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Vice President Morgan.
No questions. Again, thanks for the information. I greatly appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And Board Member Cullen.
I know that, thank you, this is Board Member Catherine Cullen. I know that WIN does attend, is there a requirement of how many board members need to be on it? I know that we've had to address getting board members there before. I want to say, Tana, if that's correct, if there was a state mandate. Or is
yes,
it just...
we did need a board member from my recollection.
They do just ask that we have board participation. Go ahead, Tana.
Right, and that board participation was meaning that we felt like we needed to have at least one board member there at the meetings. Yes.
So it was just, yeah, okay, so just one, and that suffices for the committee. Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I want to thank you for this presentation. I keep hearing a lot about SHAC, but I haven't had an opportunity to hear all about it. And so I appreciate all the information that you presented to us tonight, especially for those of us who are new on the board. It's very much appreciated. So thank you for a good presentation.
You're welcome.
Okay, and also she brought up the Behavioral Health Advisory Committee that Board Member Coleman's been working on, and that will be presented, I believe, next board meeting, right? When is what we put it on for October 26th. Yeah, October 26th. That will be coming up.
Yes. Yes, we will be giving our recommendation for to the administration, to the board and the administration.
Okay. So thank you, Board Member Coleman, too, for your just for keeping up on these things, and we appreciate you serving on those committees.
Well, and I want to say, if I may, a special thank you to Catherine, Board Member Cullen, and to Tana, because they have been a real active part of that committee, in addition to a wide variety in our community, but and in our district. So,
yeah. Okay, thank you so much. And once again, thank you for that presentation. I know a lot of work goes into all of these things. They're all just another thing that we do, but this is a very, very important committee that we have, so we very much appreciate it. Okay, we will move to our last report, which will be the attendance report. And this will be presented by Carl Leppelman, our Chief Academic Officer, and also Renee Saucedo, I'm like done for the night, our Secondary School Improvement Officer. And Renee, I was looking at you earlier with your happy face. It almost looks like it's just a picture there with your smile. So
Yes.
Well, we're in the final inning here. Sorry, it's the last report of the night. And thank you, President Galbraith, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. Attendance in a remote environment is a challenge, and it is an ongoing process. So this has been a hot topic, and it affects certainly the prior presentation, SHAC, because we were trying to meet the needs of all students. And that's not just the academic needs that Dr. Miller talked about, but also social emotional needs. So let's look at attendance. The first slide, please. Well, 3 weeks ago, I think saw Facebook blow up a little bit, and some of the root inconsistencies of the process were that a student could be on a Google Meet, like as required as part of the attendance procedure, but they didn't answer the attendance question. So in this kind of a setting, we had a procedure developed, but there's sometimes a difference between the procedure where you develop it and then you actually apply it. So a teacher might actually count the student absent when they didn't answer the question, but they were in the Google Meet, and it's really an or. They're to be in one or the other, but some teachers not trying to do this out of, being harder, just they were not clear on those expectations. So we had to make sure we set those expectations clearly. There was also the issue of Edgenuity in terms of the middle school. And when you look at Edgenuity, kids are either on track, or they're either behind in red, or they're blue, they're on track, or they're green, they're ahead. And so we got some confusion about are we measuring attendance or actual progress on that system? And so we settled on, we're going to measure attendance. They're actually logged into the platform. If they're red, that's not, you don't actually count them absent because they're in the red. You count them present, they're working. So that was an area we had to work on, and we did actually get that settled. We also noticed there was some, in general, 95% of the time, we're really good about attendance. Schools reach out, they work very hard, and Renee is going to be talking a little bit about that in another slide, to try to reach out to parents when the child's unexcused. And we did find there were some issues in the remote environment where communication was needed. We needed that timely communication turnaround and who does what. So I think we clarified that. And just generally, here's an example, number 4. Some teachers were marking students if for example, I see Tana, I see her there. I don't see that she's actually has her camera on, Tana, Mrs. Burgos, but she's on, isn't she? Is she attending or is she not attending? Because we don't know where Mrs. Burgos is right now. So we noticed that some teachers said, well, the camera's got to be on. I'm going to mark you absent. And other teachers said, no, the camera's off. I still mark them. I marked them in attendance. So we had to clarify expectations. And anytime you have a new procedure, we did that. Next slide, please. Thank you. What do we do to try to bring consistency? We kept meeting with principals at the elementary, middle, and high school. We met with attendance clerks at each level. And I think the key here with the parents out there is just trying to work with parents in terms of this new process in the remote environment, because it's new. So I think working with our parents and working with the staff and the students, I think it was important that we respond when there's a concern, because sometimes it's not, like Dr. Cleveland said, it's not because the student can't do the work. They may have other things in their way of getting there. It could be a social emotional issue, just access to getting on and things like that. So we've been trying to work, and the principals worked hard to do that. Next slide, please. So what Renee is going to go over a couple slides here is what is the process? What are some of the things we did specifically, a little more detail, and I'll follow up with some future actions that we need to take care of. Renee?
Thank you. And Jana can actually come on. I think that this concern primarily came up for secondary, but if you would like to hear what elementary is doing, Jana is also on, so she can explain that. Jana, do you want to just give a quick, this is how we do it at elementary school?
Sure. Dr. Cleveland, President Galbraith, members of the board. In elementary, now that we're in hybrid and virtual, the hybrid's obviously a lot easier. Either they're there or they're not. So that part's been figured out. The virtual is still a little bit tricky for us. We, especially as we've gotten some positive COVID cases, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but typically our teachers have a schedule, virtual teachers have a schedule with their students and with their families, and families are signing in at very specific times. A lot of the meetings are no more than 30 minutes. Of course, if they're younger, it could be less, and it's multiple times throughout the day. But sometimes we have issues with families needing to go to the store in the middle of the day, and a kid will sign off from a meet, or things that families have planned, and so kids can attend. But for the most part, I think our families are reaching out to teachers and working with them. I was talking to a few teachers today, and at most they might have 1 or 2 students are having a difficult time getting to show up for virtual, but otherwise it's been pretty successful. Once we get a positive case, we do tend to get calls from parents at the schools trying to decide if they want to move from hybrid to virtual. And recently we have moved a couple more teachers into virtual mode, anticipating that, so that we could have some room and some cushion as that goes forward. And we're trying to have some smaller classes, K through 5, so we can do that for families as possible, knowing that we only have a certain capacity each way. But we have tried to respond, and some parents have just put their children on hold and have said, you know, we're just not going to bring them for a few days and just monitor them and make sure they're good before they bring them back. And so we've really worked with families to just try to get the kids to attend as much as possible and then code them accurately. We are conducting a meeting later this week to look at maybe a different code, possibly in Power School for students who are quarantined, because we don't have a code for that. So right now we are excusing them as long as they're joining their class virtually. And that's how we've remedied that. So if a child has to go home quarantined, they join their hybrid teacher's classroom with the hybrid teacher virtually. And if it's just one, let's say they go out of town, then a student will have to be quarantined for 14 days, but they would join their class virtually. As long as they join, we mark them present. But we want to have a code for quarantine so we know why they were absent. Right now, we're just coding that in the log entries.
At the secondary level, I divided it basically, there's 2 ways that we're doing kind of long distance education, either through Edgenuity or Google Classroom. If a student's on Edgenuity, in the current process, it says that they either have to sign on or attend a Google Meets. It's difficult with Edgenuity saying just that you sign on, because if a student just signs on every day, they're never going to finish that course in a semester. And I think one of the struggles that we've had is, for so long, we've separated actions from grades, and attendance is an action. So you're in class, and maybe you're in class and not doing the work, but you're still in class. When you're doing education like we are right now, a student needs to actually show progress in Edgenuity. And so I think that that's where some of the struggle that we've been seeing this first month, that's part of the problem. And so that's one thing that we're really kind of looking at. I know at the high school level, they were saying you have to be, you have to have made progress or attended a Google Meet. And if you were behind and didn't attend a Google Meet, then you were going to be counted absent. That's not exactly how it was written in the process, but that keeps a kid on track so they earn the credit at the end of the semester. And so that's really one of the things that we need to go back and look at. In Google Classroom, a student had to answer a question within the Google Classroom. If they attended the Google Meet, and Carl said this earlier, but didn't answer the question, the teacher was going down and looking at the question and saying you were absent because you didn't answer that question, but you were actually on the meet. Now, a parent can call in and, you know, correct that, but I think that that was some of the things that were causing frustrations as far as absences were concerned. This is just, it's such a unique time, and we're asking students who are 11 or 14 or 17, it doesn't matter, but we're asking them to develop this time management skill that is very difficult for a lot of adults. And so we want you to make sure you're supposed to be in school for 6.5 hours a day, and you need to be working, and that's not an easy thing to do. So we have some kids that, you know, we're seeing families taking camping trips, and so they get counted absent, or they don't have access to Wi-Fi wherever they're at. Maybe they're with one family this week and a different family, their other parent the next week, and one has internet access and the other doesn't. We're just seeing a lot of different situations that we don't necessarily always know the answer of how we're going to treat that. Carl talked about students not having their camera on. We have students that are in bed when they're, they're nice and cozy in bed in class. And how do we treat that? So I just think that this is such an unprecedented time, and we're trying to take attendance. PED has told us take attendance every single day, and we're trying to take attendance like we used to, and we just have to figure out a different way to do that. Jane, could you go to the next slide, please?
Renee,
Yes.
do you have something, I'm sorry, if I don't, about the Google extension?
Oh, yes, thank you so much. So Google just recently put out an extension that actually takes attendance of every student who has been in the Google Meet, and it will tell you, Renee was in Google Meet from 5:30 p.m. until 8:11 p.m. Or Carl was in Google Meet from 5:30 to 5:31. And so that we feel, and that's something that we have now. It just started in October. And so I think that that's going to make a huge difference, because we'll have something that's documented, and it's automatically, from my understanding, I have to find this out for sure, but from my understanding, it's sent to the teacher after the meet. So that's going to help, hopefully, in a huge way. The way that we follow up at the school level with absences, of course, you're going to get a phone call from the attendants to let you know that your student was absent. Teachers might call. Secondary level, we usually, especially if a student has been absent from several classes, we'll give that either to the grade level secretary or counselor or administrator, so that a family's not getting 6 or 7 different phone calls from every single class. Emails from teachers, counselors, and administrators. You can change the absence. I know in some of the Facebook posting after we talked about this, we're still in school. Some of the Facebook posts said that it was difficult to get that changed. A teacher can't change it once it's the next day. A teacher can't change an absence to excused. So that has to go through the attendance clerk. So that could have caused some of the problems. Of course, we have 3, 5, and 10 day truancy letters for unexcused absences. Now there is a truancy intake form that Student Services has created, and we have truancy officers that will actually go out to the homes to see what's going on. Engage New Mexico, Dr. Cleveland has talked about this a couple of times. We currently have 660 secondary students on the Engage New Mexico list, and they continue to try to contact. So it's just like a another level of follow-up that we're doing. And they're trying to also contact students. And basically what they do sometimes, they try to find out what the barriers are that's keeping that student from participating at school, and then finding ways to help them overcome those barriers. And I think we're ready for the next slide, and we'll go back to Carl.
Thank you, Renee. Looks like you already took care of number 1. You did a great job. Thank you. And that's going to be great for our teachers to be more consistent and not take as much time to get that attendance taken. We do need to revisit the procedure. Any new procedure in a new environment like this, we're currently doing that. One of the things we noticed at elementary is the expectation too low. And what we're finding is that there's some changes. Once you implement something, you need to make some changes, but certainly you don't want to make changes without working with our attendance clerks, working with the community at large, and making sure everybody understands that. So we're being very careful about any changes to procedure number 18, because we're just now getting really close to where we're need to be to make sure students are counted as present when they are. We do have a survey that is called the Fall Learning Experience Survey that Dr. Cleveland mentioned, I think, at the last board meeting. And that information will does talk a little bit about, will give us some good information about how we can move forward to make this more successful. And then we need to focus on, I believe, a positive problem-solving approach rather than one which is punitive. Now, granted, there is a compulsory attendance law, and our expectation is kids are in school. If you think about school, it's one of the safest places to be if you're there physically. Is that right? It's a good place, and a lot of our kids are missing that. But when they're remote, it's just equally as important that we engage and build those relationships and connections. And I think we want to make sure students are engaged. And when a student is missing or unaccounted for, what are we doing about that? And so I think that we work very hard as a team to do that. And our truancy officers are currently working hard. And we want to make sure kids are attending. The other part is that lines of communication be open and remove those barriers, as Renee talked about, to online access and learning. And I think we've done a really great job with IT. Met with Paul Romero the other day in the attendance clerks. They're really working very hard. Over 900 homes they've provided connectivity to. That should not be a barrier. We remove that. When there's a situation occurs, they had text jump on it. We have a help desk that's working. So I think we need to focus on that and then move forward as a district. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to questions from the board relative to attendance.
Thank you, Carl and Renee and Gianna too. Dr. Cleveland, would you like to give any comments?
Well, just one. I mean, who would have ever dreamed that one of our biggest challenges this year is taking roll? It's something that's just so basic and that we just have done forever. And taking attendance has become a huge issue. It is a really good example, though, of taking an established procedure and trying to apply it to a totally new environment, totally new situation. And so it has been very challenging. And then on top of that, we take that attendance to determine our funding for next year. So, it is, as everyone said, a work in progress. But I just want to say people worked really hard to try to work this out and try to make it work for the staff and but also for families. That being said, this is school. And you do have to come and you do need to sign in. And it is important that you do that. So I hope that we're getting better. And I think we are. And I think we're finding more solutions for it. And, I think we'll come up with a whole different approach in terms of how we take attendance and how we account for students learning. The other issue, and I think it was alluded to, are the students who sign in and then walk away. Just signing in, that doesn't cut it. You have to sign in and you have to do your work and you have to participate and you have to be there, just like you do in class. So, signing on and coming every day and working is it's a hard thing for some of our students because this is, again, a new environment for them as well. They're having to learn to manage their time differently. They're having to learn a lot of new skills. So I think it's getting better. Thank you for a really good report. I think it helps people understand the complexity of what, people say, why don't you just take roll? Well, okay, it's a little more complicated than that. So I hope we've answered your questions. We've had a lot of reports tonight. I would just remind the board that all but 2 of them were your requests. So, but we are trying to do those spotlight reports and get that information back to you as soon as possible because it is changing and we want you to be in the know and know what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it's really important that you be, that you stay informed about that. So I just want to say thank you for listening through all of these reports tonight. And there was an awful lot of information, but hopefully you got your questions answered and we'll continue to try to update you as those things change. But anyway, thank you for your attention through a rather long evening.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland, and thank you all for staying with us too during this long evening. You're here with us. So. It is. So we appreciate it. You know, and I'm going to go to the board in just a second here, but, you know, for attendance, just as a parent who has kids spread across all of these levels, at the beginning, it was really, really hard, but I agree that I think it's getting a lot better, and I've noticed it a lot better. It seemed like those first few days, I just kept getting calls from the attendance line, and I was like, I'm going to lose my mind. Child, where are you? Are you in class? So, but it really has gotten so much better, and I think it's going to continue to get that way. And I have kids in virtual and kids in hybrid, and they're all over. So I kind of feel it from all the different aspects, and it's hard. So we'll go ahead and go over to the board. Catherine Collin.
Thank you. This is Board Member Cullen. So thank you so much for bringing this. And I know there's a lot of reports tonight, and most of it's a request of the board, but I think these are really good reports for us to have. We get the community asking questions and trying to understand things. And then as well as, you know, something that might have to do with budget, you know, just different information that we really need to be able to have a better understanding of. And this attendance was, of course, requested by me because I did see that Facebook, but I also had heard from some other parents that were really having some difficulties, as well as I think some schools were having some difficulties trying to navigate through this process. And it sounds like it's still a work in progress. So we're not quite where we need to be yet, is what I'm getting from the report, Carl, and you're shaking your head, yes. And then
Yes.
Do they have to have their cameras on while they're on? Have you guys determined?
Yes. Yes, they do.
I know when I took CE
So we're all present right now. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, and I was going to say, when I'm in a CE class, I have one particular CE class that I have to be, you have to see your full face in it to make sure that you're in attendance for it. But I know that's hard for teenagers and all these classes, and as long as it is. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Carl.
No, you're correct. It's definitely a work in progress. And as soon as we wrote in fact, we've been meeting again with the attendance team to look at what's working, what's not, and then talk with principals and make those changes. We found out that the only way to work in this environment is to huddle. And we huddle every week with every level with principals in different groups, because without that, it's a continuous progress in terms of improvement. And I think it's changing. It changes every day. So, and as we get more quarantined issues and other things like that, it's also going to be required that we follow through. So, yeah.
And I was thinking not only just the quarantine aspect, but if somebody's in the household that gets sick, that has COVID, and they're positive, or not even just COVID, but another type of illness. It's not, say if mom gets the flu or dad gets the flu and it's not COVID, but you know, it used to be you could send your kid home to school if they weren't sick. And now you have a sick parent, the kid's just trying to get through the day because maybe the parent can't help them out that much. So that's, I think it's really going to play a big role in this as well, especially going through the winter months and the flu season that's coming on. And then COVID, of course, I know people that have been out for months sick with COVID back in Colorado. So the only thing I thought is, you know, if somebody in the household gets it, you know, mom and dad might not be able to help that much. So that'll definitely affect our attendance.
Right. And those elementary students who are still at home, that chose hybrid, their parents are the coach, and that's a partnership. So you're right. If they're not there, then who's going to help in that situation? Now, in the elementary procedure, it does talk about extenuating circumstances. So we do have to work with, we every day teachers work with parents and principals and counselors with their parents. So I think it's just like we have school, but we would do it virtually. So all those supports still need to be in place with the expectation that that students are attending to the greatest degree possible. But there will be extenuating circumstances, like you just mentioned. A parent sick, can't help. Yeah.
And I think that's going to be very important for PED to understand. I mean, they're not letting this go for the school year, but it's such a challenge. And they've got to look at that, you know, with the family dynamics and everything that's with there, they are going to have to really look at this attendance issue that we're going to see across the state. So thank you.
Well, and we're even finding with families that have multiple kids, even just having everyone on a device at the same time is difficult. So you can be the most organized family ever, and you're still going to have difficulties having everybody on the device doing what they need to be doing.
And if you see me tonight, Renee, I probably lost the meeting like 10 times. So, or more. So I'm the only device right now. My husband's out and my daughters are out of the house. So I'm just like,
yep.
And it's a challenge just for me to get onto a Google Meet sometimes. And, you know, I have internet service and it's just really difficult here. So absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you know, one thought I was just thinking as you guys were going through too is, you know, I have a couple of classes that I teach and teach online. And I have students who are so high anxiety about being on camera that we've had to, I want them to be on camera because I need to know that they're there. But we've kind of said like, you know, if it's such a huge issue, and you have to be careful doing those kind of things, but if it's a huge issue, then I have to talk to your parents. And this has to be a conversation between me and your parents on those things. But I have noticed that we've had in the group that I teach with that sometimes there's kids that just will not, they won't go on to Google Meets anymore because of the anxiety that it can cause to get on. And so anyway, that's a concern, but it's all these issues never thought we would be dealing with that we see as we go through this. So Wynn Coleman.
No, just thank you. It's just an amazing time, but just thank you for all that you're doing. So
thank you. And Jeffrey Morgan?
Yes, a couple questions. The first one, it was talked about, but Renee, Carl, you guys mentioned that the Google Meets knows when the student is on. So what if a student turns it on and then walks away, but so it tracks the whole entire time of the student being on the call? That's the question that I have.
I haven't used it, but I would imagine that it only tracks once you've entered the Google Meets. It not if you walk away or if you're at the park and you put your phone down or whatever. It just tracks when you're actually on the Google Meet. When you know, but it doesn't say whether you're actually involved in you're engaged in the meet. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Could turn it. Yeah, so a student could turn it on and walk away and be gone, and
Yes,
still
sir.
looks like they're there. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. The other question I had was, how much leeway or how much time do you give from a tardy standpoint? Let's say, I mean, we've been talking all night about somebody having IT issues. So if somebody can't get on and yet 25, 30 minutes later, they finally get on, do we take that into consideration as well, that the student just couldn't get on or had internet issues?
Well, I think they're probably counted as a tardy, but you know, that's another one of those kind of fine lines where you say, okay, you can be 15 minutes late, but what if it's 16? What if it's 17? Like you're always gonna, so we haven't put an exact number on that. But I think that teachers are counting students tardy when they come in late.
But they just don't, they haven't determined the time when they count a student tardy. Okay. All right.
Speaking of those weird tech things, is it happening to everyone else where Renee's mouth is moving, and it's all offset?
I'm doing that on purpose just to mess with you guys.
You know, here's a funny, since I know we're almost done, but this happened to one of my students the other day. He talked and his voice he was totally done speaking and just staring at us, and his voice is still going. And I had to send him a chat like, we're still listening to your voice. It's okay. Like, just give us a second. It's catching up. So, oh, good times. Okay.
That's it for me. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Dr. Cleveland, did you have anything else about this report that you wanted to add?
No, just thank you for the report. What a time. Like I said, who would have ever imagined that just even taking roll would be such a difficult thing. But I think it is getting better, and hopefully you're not hearing as many complaints. we're not getting as many calls. And so I think things are evening out a little bit as we get a little better about our processes and our procedures. So no, but thank you for the report.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you for the report. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And honestly, with any online learning, anyone who's ever done online classes, it takes some time to kind of get an understanding of those things. It does take time, and it does get better, but it's a little difficult when you first start. So, okay. Board, is there anything that I neglected on here since we moved some things around? I have everything crossed out other than the calendar. Did I hit everything today? Okay. Okay. So with that, we'll talk about advanced planning. We have October 14th. This Wednesday is the 40th day. And also on the 14th, there's an NMSBA region meeting that you can get virtually for the board. Just for your information, it's in your email. They sent out the Zoom link for that meeting if you would like to go to it. And I believe it's 5 to 7 on that day. And then October 26th is a regular board meeting at 5:30, which will be virtual. October 30th and November 2nd will be elementary school conferences. November 2nd, we'll have another regular board meeting that will be at 5:30 virtual. November 3rd will be election day. And then November 16th will be another regular board meeting at 5:30 p.m. done virtually. And with that, for this night, our meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for coming out.
Aye.
Thank you.
I just want to say for those board
Before you go, Lynn, could I ask you a question? You sent me